10.
And this is
SpielMill's top 10 mechanism video.
another one. Well, this one is, the last one we did was worker placement. And this time we're doing our top 10 games with tile placement.
Yes.
We didn't talk about what that meant.
No, much like we did with worker placement. So I suspect it means something different for both of us.
Yeah, I decided, well, I kind of moved polyomino placement into a different category.
Yeah, I basically did as well. There was a couple games on here that are games I absolutely love, but it was more, we'll see. Tile laying wasn't
central, or
yeah, not even that it wasn't central. There was no decision. The decision space wasn't in the tile laying.
right.
It was maybe in sort of like getting the tiles. So
I mean, that's kind of true.
Yeah.
A little bit for some of my picks too.
yeah, so mostly I looked at games with worker placements. I looked for games that had really interesting worker placement mechanisms. With tile laying, I looked for games where the tile laying provided really interesting decision space.
I guess I did a little bit of that, but I mostly picked the games I liked the most to some degree, but I also picked just a more classic tile laying, like, you know, I don't know. Well, I don't want to spoil my choices, so I don't know.
All right, shall we do our honorable mentions?
Yeah, let's do it.
Right.
How many do you have?
I could do 3.
I have 3 as well.
I have a bunch that are sort of clustered near the top, but I have 3 that really went into the...
Yeah, I had like 8, and I was like, I'll make it 3.
Yeah. Well, actually, technically, I have 4.
Okay. Well, why don't you go first then?
Okay.
Your honorable mention.
Well, so I'm going to go with the fourth, with the last one, the fourth one, which doesn't quite make it in there. Part of it is I can't quite remember how tile laying works in the game, and that is Lisboa. But Mercado de Lisboa, I thought, had a really interesting tile laying mechanism, and I know Lisboa uses that. And so because I can't quite remember how it works in the game, it's been a minute since we've played Lisboa, I didn't want to put Lisboa in, but putting in Mercado de Lisboa felt weird because it takes the mechanism out of Lisboa, which is a better game that I like more. So that's why it's just, I didn't know what to do with it. So it's 14. I don't even know if it's honorable mention. I just had to mention it.
Well, Lisboa didn't make my list. Kind of similar reasons. I didn't fully remember the tile laying aspect of it. And yeah, I don't know. And you know, Lisboa is one of my favorite games. So it's that just didn't make the list for that reason.
I just thought Mercado is really interesting, the way it sort of like activates the
scoring.
It's super interesting.
I forgot, of course, that's in Lisboa, but I don't remember how. That's weird.
Which is why it is not even on my honorable mention. It's just mentioned.
Well, my first honorable mention's kind of honorable, although I kind of had one of these games make the list. It's kind of honorable mention because it's cards and not tiles to some degree, but really because it was close to my list, and that's Sprawlopolis.
Yeah.
It's, you know, it's card laying, but it's really like you're using the cards as tiles.
Yeah.
So it kind of meets the qualification.
Yeah, it was in my top 20 or so that I was considering, but that's all I can say. I won't say whether it made the rest or not. So, but it is a very good game. So my first honorable mention is...
I thought you had your first.
Well, that was just a mention. This is an honorable
That was less honorable. I have my dishonorable mentions. They're coming later.
Yes.
So no honor in them at all.
Is Factory Funner.
Okay.
Because there's not... I mean...
It's a different kind of tiling.
Yeah, it's a different kind of tiling, but it's so interesting, and it has that sort of like real-time grabbing of the tiles, although we don't do that very much, but I just think it's such a neat game, and it doesn't get talked about a lot, and so that's why that's one of my honorable mentions.
All right, well, my second honorable mention is either, you could pick either King Domino or Queen Domino, but basically these are really good tile placement games, domino placement. And but they just didn't make my top 10.
Yeah. So my next one is Habitats. a very classic tiling. It's one of the first ones that I was introduced to. It's not super complicated, but it has a couple of different layers of like strategy, making sure that your animals have a big enough habitat for them. And you know, you could sort of cut yourself off from one by building out another. And there's like park ranger towers and lines of sight. And so there's a lot going on there. And I really, really enjoy this game. I think it's, again, it's not talked about a lot. And it has what makes a tile laying game really fun and interesting.
Oh, my leg is against the table, so I might have been shaking the cameras. Apologize for that. Okay, well, my next honorable mention is a classic tile laying game, but it just didn't make my top 10, and that's Carcassonne, or Carcassonne the City is my favorite version. I just really enjoy it.
Yeah, it is absolutely, when I think of tile laying, that is the game that comes up in my head.
That's the one that comes to mind. Yeah. Now, there just are better games, in my opinion, and I don't know, some of them are just more interesting.
Yeah. All right, and then my last honorable mention is, boy, I could have done a whole bunch. I really struggled to like prioritize like which I like better. I don't even know why this made the list ahead of some others, is Cascadia. And I thought about putting Calico up there, but I think Calico is just a little bit extra brain burny. And one of the things I like about tile laying is that it's kind of, for me, it's relaxing. It's super satisfying. Like putting down a tile that matches the one next to it and building out an area is so satisfying and in its own way relaxing. And Cascadia has that more than I think Calico. Calico just always feels so stressful to me, despite the quilts and the kittens. You would think it would be calm, but it's not.
No, it's stressful.
Yeah, but Calico, I'm sorry, but Cascadia is just a nice welcoming game where you're building out your habitats, and you don't even have to have the terrain types match. You can just put them down anywhere, which feels like cheating to me. But the only reason I think it's that low is it's just a little simple, and some of the ones that made higher had a little bit more to them.
All right,
let's
do our top 10. Now you should go first. I went first on the worker placement.
Okay,
so number 10.
My number 10 is a classic, and actually it's kind of simple in the line of Cascadia, but really love it, and that's Alhambra.
Oh yeah.
We've played a lot of this game. We've played it with 2. I think it's better with more than 2, with 3, without the Automa player, which we're doing online. But there's something so wonderful about building out your Alhambra and you know, creating this floor plan or this for your little village, whatever it is. But there's that extra level of like who has more of what color buildings score the most, how, you know, I need to make my wall longer. I don't want to block myself off from being able to build somewhere. So it's got a lot going on. It's a pretty simple mechanisms, but it brings some heft to it that makes it really satisfying.
All right. So my number 10 is kind of Cult of the New. This is one I've been really enjoying, and that's Applejack. Applejack is a new game from Uwe Rosenberg, newish. Not his newest, I think, but it's just so, there's 2 things about this game. It's so warm feeling, like the art and everything just feels so warm, but the gameplay does too. It's just a simple tiling where you're matching tiles against tiles and then trying to create little blocks of the same kind of apple to get as many points as possible. Seems kind of simple, but it's actually quite interesting and quite strategic. And so I really enjoy it.
Yep, that is an excellent one. Okay, my number 9 is one that you already mentioned in your honorable mentions. And that is the King Domino family of games. I think Queen Domino is my favorite, and for it to like bump into the top 10, I think that's why I would go with Queen Domino. But the other thing I love about this game is that, again, it's so welcoming. It's one that you can play with anybody. It's a great way to get people into modern board gaming and to think about some of the mechanisms, in particular tiling, and anybody can just pick it up in like no time at all. Queen Domino, I like because it brings that extra level of thinking where you're buying the buildings, and you've got your tax collector. I love Queen Domino. We haven't played Origins very much. That could potentially overtake Queen Domino, but I think probably not. I think probably Queen Domino would be my favorite of the tiling. But it's just so, like, you know, getting that perfect tile that has crowns on it and matches exactly in that spot that you want to put it in your kingdom is great. I love that feeling.
Absolutely.
That's my number 9.
All right. So my number 9 is kind of again, this is technically not tiles, but it's cards. And so it's cards that you're using like tiles, and it's called Grove. And this is from a series of games called Orchard, Grove, and Forage, which is in the mail right now for us. This is a solo game, and it's basically you're just overlaying different fruit trees with other fruit trees on cards and trying to get as many points as possible. And if you want to create little blocks. It's like if you put a red fruit over a red fruit, you put a die over it and you get to increase the value of the die, which gives you more points. If you put a red over a green, it kills the spot and you can't place another card over the spot for the rest of the game. It's really puzzly, really fun, and just really quick. It's like a 5-10 minute game, but it's really fun. I really enjoy it, and I thought it was a good representation of, even though it's technically cards, it's a good representation of tile placement.
Yeah, it really is. That's a really good choice. I haven't played this as much as you have, but I've really enjoyed that, that thinky puzzle of trying to, again, you know, put things down in the spot that's going to maximize your value on them.
Yep, it gives me that real tactile feel still, even though it's cards instead of tiles.
It does, and it's so clever to be able to get that much game into something that is just, you know, a handful of cards.
Yep.
I really appreciate that in a designer.
All right. Well, that was my number 9, Grove or Orchard. Oops, sorry about that. We had a little technical issue. Back to Jen.
Yeah. So, number 8 just says Uwe, and it's because there's that group of games. There's
Okay, sorry folks. We've had some technical issues, and then we were confused where we were, and then the sky fell, and
all right, take 27.
A lot of things happened. You don't even see any of it.
I know. I don't know where we left off, but at some point I recognized that I just wrote Uwe on number 8. Okay. And I didn't narrow it down. And it's because he's got these tile placement games that I think of as sort of a group, like Framework, Sagani, Nova Luna, and you're basically putting down tiles that have some scoring thing on them, and they're going to score based on their relationship to a tile next to it. Maybe it scores if it's next to 3 red, or maybe it scores if it's next to, I don't remember what's on Sagani, but they're all more or less the same mechanism, right? Nova Luna is my favorite. I really, really find this satisfying. I don't know why I like this so much. I know that it's not your favorite set of games, but I love it. I don't know why. Just Nova Luna just speaks to me. Putting down, you know, a red tile, and I have to have 3 red tiles so this blue tile can score. But that blue tile needs, or the red tile that I put down needs 1 blue and 2 red. And oh my God, now I just scored a whole bunch of them by putting down that 1 tile. I really enjoy these. I really enjoy them. They're super simple. Again, it's that super simple mechanism, but so much evaluation that goes on in every turn. And Uwe is yet again, you know, the master of taking something kind of simple and turning it into a really, really fun brain-burning puzzle.
Yeah. No, these are good. Applejack's kind of my pick for the Uwe of abstract games.
Yeah, and I guess Applejack probably falls in the same category. I think of it a little bit differently because it's not abstract. I mean, it is, but the apples make it feel a little bit less
thematic.
But this is like red dots and blue dots, you know, that's so abstract. Yeah. I don't know why, because I'm normally really like a lot of theme, but I just like Nova Luna.
All right.
All right, so that's my number 8.
And which one is your pick for that?
Nova Luna. Uwe.
All right. Yeah. All right, my number 8. This is a game. Now, this is a game where the tile laying is technically just part of the game. It is a big part of the game. And this is where my list is a little bit of back and forth between, oh, I really like this game.
Yeah.
Oh, this is tile laying. And in this case, this is Tabanusi, Builders of Ur. And Tabanusi has this pretty cool tile laying thing going on where you're laying tiles down, and depending on what you lay down and where you lay it down, and what pieces you lay down on it,
yeah,
it does different. It gives you points, and it's just really interesting and really fun, and it is a core part of the game, but it's not the whole game.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like and Tabanusi is definitely one of those games where you have several things going on. You know, you can get points in several different ways, but the tile laying is a bigger part of it than, say, I don't know, Feast for Odin or something.
Yeah. Yeah. No, exactly.
Well, that's Polyama. But
this was on my list, and then off my list, and then on my list, and then off my list. And then I'm not going to tell you where it ended up, whether it's on my list or not. But this definitely, I had sort of the same same thought process with it.
Yeah. I mean, it's a really good game. It's one of the T games. It's definitely a heavier game. It's kind of neat. It's based on the ancient city of Ur, and even though it feels abstract, it's definitely actually thematic. It's interesting.
Yeah, no, it really is. I find this game to be, I think, really thematic, especially when we dug into sort of the history of Ur. Yeah. It's built on a swamp, and there's water gardens, as some of the tiles are putting down water gardens. Yeah. Very thematic. So
very interesting. It's got a really interesting. You send workers, I guess, to different ports, and then it's based on the colors of the ship and the dice, and it's interesting.
Yeah.
So, all right, that's my number 8. Tabanusi, Builders of Ur.
That is a great choice. My number 7, you've already mentioned as an honorable mention again.
Oh my gosh.
It is, it's a classic, and that is Carcassonne. Okay. Because when I think about a game that is satisfying as you lay down the tile, Carcassonne is like one of the top ones, that having to, I mentioned earlier, like Cascadia, the sides don't have to match. Yes, they do. It's just discordant for them not to match. It drives me crazy. But, with Carcassonne, trying to get all of those sides to match and trying to maximize your scoring. And there's lots of different variants. So you can kind of find one that, find one that speaks to you that you love. And I know we do like the city because it has that extra sort of bit of it, like with the wall. But just straight up, good old fashioned Carcassonne at its core is what I think of when I think of a tile laying game. Yep. And also, again, another welcoming game. I have brought more people into the hobby with this game than I think almost any others. Oh. And that's my number 7.
That makes sense. My number 7 is, when I sold this on the list of games, because we made a list of games based on the BGG tag for tile placement. I sold this on this list, and I was like, really? And I was like, oh yeah, it really is. And it is tile placement, and that's Paint the Roses. Paint the Roses is a deduction game, but where you're placing these tiles in order to help narrow down and give clues about what symbols are on your cards, and because you're trying to guess each other's cards. It's really fascinating.
It is, and you're right. There is actually, again, a lot of decision space in, if I put this one down, it's going to give them a really good hint, but there's also like a detractor in there. And so thinking about that, or I need to know something about that person's card. If I put this down, not only will I give a hint for my card, but I'll get a hint back for their card that I need to test. So, and
this game is one we have the deluxe edition of, and it's so beautifully done. The tiles, like in Azul, they click-clack kind of thing.
I love the click-clack.
Very nice. Very nice production. So that adds to the experience as well.
Yeah, it really does.
And that's one thing about tile laying is it's very tactile. So when you have the tactile components that make little click-clack sounds, it really does kind of add to the experience.
Yeah.
So that's my number 7, Paint the Roses.
Well, my number 6, I'm wondering if it's too high, but I mean, it's kind of where it landed. And I think it's a placeholder for a game we haven't played yet, because it has a mechanism in it that to me just takes it above and beyond. And that is Between Two Cities.
Oh, yeah.
Because it's tiling, right? You're trying to build this city with, you know, what according to whatever rule is going to score. So you have the most restaurants or whatever it is next to each other. But you're playing with like 2 other people that are also putting tiles down on the same city. So it's not just you alone that's thinking about that, you know, that where that tile is going to go and what tile's next. You have to kind of think about what your partner's going to do. And I think this is probably going to be a stand-in for Between Two Castles of Mad King Ludwig, which we have not played. I don't even think we have, but I suspect that because of the added complexity of it, and taking that, you know, really satisfying tiling puzzle, which I love so much, and then adding that element of working kind of with other people, but also not with them, is just such a interesting and unique thing to have in a game.
Yeah, I mean, you work with other people in Between Two Cities, so.
Yeah. Well, no, I mean, yes.
Yeah.
But I think Between Two Castles of Mad King Ludwig takes that and then amps it up, which is what would probably push it to the top for me.
Okay. All right, my number 6 is a game you mentioned in your honorable mentions, and I really like it because of the very clever tile placement rules, but also the application of the ecology of the wildlife, and that's Habitats. Habitats is a game, a tile placement game where you have different types of habitats, like water and forest and mountain and a rock and, you know, stuff like that. And then you have like a species. And so let's say you have a species, some sort of lizard that likes rock and water and forest mixture. And maybe its requirements are like 1 rock, 1 water, and 2 forest. Then you can place it next to those habitats to get points. But the other tricky thing, and Uwe copied this, is that you could place it next to 1 forest tile, and as long as that forest tile is adjacent to another forest tile, that counts as 2.
Yeah.
So it doesn't have to be adjacent to both forest tiles to get 2 forest tiles. So you could have a tile that needs 5 forest tiles. You're like, how do I get 5 adjacent tiles? But it's because you only need it next to 1 that's next to 4 more. And it can chain react like that. Right. And that is so clever.
It is.
And it's so interesting and puzzly as a game. Now, it's a light game, so it's not a hard game, but it's just still cool and puzzly.
You're right. And I hadn't even thought about that, but you're right. It does use that exact same mechanism. And it makes sense, though. And it's so much more thematic in Habitats, because the idea is that if an animal needs forest space, right, it doesn't have to have that forest space all like up against it. It just needs to have that area to roam, right?
Too much forest!
And you can see why it makes sense in Habitats. It's Corné van Moorsel.
Corné van Moorsel. My brain froze. But so anyway, really good. And Allplay republished it. But I really like Habitats, and it's a very comfortable game. If you're into like ecology, you're building a park, and it's really fun that way. And I like this game a lot. So my number 6 is Habitats.
All right. Well, my number 5 is the only polyomino game on my list.
Okay.
And it is My City.
Oh, okay. I almost included it, but I decided to exclude all polyomino.
Gotcha. Well, and I kind of excluded all polyominoes except for this one because of the campaign, the what do you call that?
Legacy?
Thank you, because of the legacy nature of it, right? The placement rules change from game to game, and that's what's interesting, is that you don't get stuck in the routine of like, well, I know exactly what I'm doing this one. You know, that should always go next to that one, or that can only go there. But it literally changes throughout the whole course of the campaign. And so it's not necessarily each individual game that's interesting to me. It's the experience that this is going to evolve over time and change.
That makes sense.
I think it's I love it. It's such an interesting game. And then of course, you know, you can change it up again with My Island or with My City Roll and Write, and you've got this endless variation on the theme of placing your polyominoes in this area.
Well, My Island is hexagon, so.
All right, fair enough.
Yep. Yeah. Good, both good games.
Yeah. All right, so that is my number 5.
My number 5 is a classic tile laying game. Not as classic as Carcassonne. It doesn't go that far back, but it does go pretty far back. And this one's from Stefan Feld. It's called Castles of Burgundy, and this is a really good game. And I just find it's so interesting. And it's kind of got a between two cities thing going, but with the scoring, to some extent.
Right.
Kind of.
Yeah.
Kind of. Yeah, maybe a stretch. But anyway, you're placing tiles on different habitats. And then when you finish a habitat, you score that habitat based on the size of the habitat and how many tiles are in it that scores more points or less points. And then then you have tiles like these yellow tiles that give you powers or endgame scoring, or you have mine tiles that give you gold. You can buy tiles with gold. You have workers that allow you to manipulate dice. All kinds of stuff are going on. It's such a brilliant game. It is a recognized brilliant game. We do have the Super Deluxe edition of Castles of Burgundy, and yes, it is wonderful.
We don't have the 3D animals, though.
We don't. It just got a little expensive.
It's okay.
But we really love it, and I do like the Vineyard expansion that comes with it.
Yeah.
I think it adds to the game. So I think this is a really great game. I thought it deserved to be in my top 10, obviously. My top 5. My number 5.
Yeah.
Castles of Burgundy.
So I'm going to spoil the rest of my list a little bit and say this is not on my list. And I feel like we could do like a whole video about why things aren't on my list. Yeah. Castles of Burgundy is very high on my all-time favorite list. The reason I didn't include it in a tile laying game list is that, to me, part of the game is more in the tile drafting. It was like a nitpicky point, right? Like, how are you going to decide which of these amazing games to put on the list? And so I eliminated it because the most of the puzzle isn't in laying it down. It's in sort of the drafting.
I would say it's both.
You're probably right, but I needed to cull the list somehow. I'm sticking by it.
No, we both have to make arbitrary decisions when making these lists. So that is part of the process. So if you ever make a list like this, don't fret the fact that you have to make sort of arbitrary decisions, because it's just part of life.
Tomorrow this list could look really different. Just trying to thinking through the mechanism of tile laying and what, like, when I enjoy a game, it's the tile laying part of it that makes me like it. So. All right, my number 4. My number 4 is this Super Chunk game that I love so much.
Super Chunk, what a great
Super
band.
Chunk. It's Heaven and Ale.
Oh, nice. And we have a crossover.
Woo! Right at this number?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, that's so funny.
Heaven and Ale.
Yeah. One of the what I love about this game when it comes to tile laying is that there's multiple things to think about. So when you recruit a tile, how much you pay for it, as well as how much it pays out, depends on whether you put it on the shady side or the light side, right? So
one side will give you more points, one side will give you more money.
Exactly. And it might cost more to put it in one place, and so there's like all of these different calculations. And then the other thing that's really cool about it is the way they activate is a monk tile. You have these monk tiles, right? And so you have to put the monk, and whatever tile is touching it will activate when you score that monk, but only when you score that monk, right? And so it's like trying to get enough tiles around that monk to then you like time that with the opportunity to get the monk and score it. There's so much going on here. It's such a delightful game, and that a lot of the game to me is in trying to figure out like what tile you're going to place where and when.
But another big part of this game is the ratchet track, I would argue.
Oh yeah, for sure.
But yeah, the one-way board.
That is true.
And that's how you get the tiles, and it's so tricky. It's so interesting.
Yeah, that is true. The ratchet track is a huge part of it, and I think that the complexity that adds into getting them, like I really want to put down, you know, a yellow tile which will give me wheat, but I can't get a yellow tile which will give me wheat unless I bypass all of this other juicy stuff, right? And so it's both the like, how am I going to get the tile I need? And then once I get it, where am I going to put it?
Yep.
Can I afford to put it on the side that's going to give me resources, you know?
No,
so
but I agree. The tile placement's very intriguing in this game, and it's such a great game. It feels cozy, and it's got a good theme.
It does. We love this game.
Yep.
All right.
Our number 4 is Heaven and Ale.
Heaven and Ale, yeah. My number 3 is a game that's relatively new to us. We just played within the last 12 months or so, and that is Glenmore. Glenmore 2.
Oh, wow. That's really high.
And we've played it online a couple of times too. And what makes this really interesting to me is that when you place down a tile, it will activate the tiles around it. And so you only get to activate certain tiles a certain number of times. And that means that not only are you recruiting a tile for like future state, but you're recruiting a tile for what's going to happen when you set it down and what it's going to activate. And so it's like a double calculus. You know, in the future, I need to have that castle, but I really want to put something down over there next to that thing because I need that to produce wheat or something like that, or produce animals. And I don't want my castle over there, or I can't go over there. It connects to the river over there, or something like that. There's just, it's super, when it comes to the tile laying portion of it, especially, it's just a very, very interesting calculus that goes into that. So that's why Glenmore 2.
I mean, it's a good game. I was just surprised it made your top 10, I guess.
Well, when I was thinking about what I like about tiles and what tiles were interesting, I just remember that you know, oh, if I get this one and I can put it next to that animal, and that's going to produce animals, but it's also going to do this because I put that tile there, and then that tile is going to go, and that's going to, you know, snowball. It's almost like the roll and write, like bonuses on bonuses on bonuses if you do it right. Which is fun.
All right.
That's my number 3, Glenmore 2.
My number 3 is a beautiful game, and that maybe carried it a little bit. But it's a light to medium weight game. It's not heavy at all, but it's very delightful, and I really enjoy it a lot. And that is Tang Garden. And Tang Garden like I said, it's beautiful. I mean, it's got these. It's not just tile laying, but it's got figures, like miniatures that you put on, and then they're looking at 3D landscapes or 2D landscapes, and they see things in the landscapes, and you get points for that, and you get points based on pagodas and flowers and all kinds of stuff. So it is very, very lovely game, and I just thought it deserved to be this high on my list because I do really enjoy it, in part because of the beauty, but also because the gameplay is quite solid. So my number 3 is Tang Garden.
That's a great choice, and we can roll right into my number 2 on that one, which happens to also be Tang Garden.
Oh, great.
It's almost a crossover. Yeah, this is just such a beautiful game, and that carries it. But it is, you are building, you're putting out your tiles, and you start actually with like a colorless board, and you put down the tiles, which have ponds and gardens, and they're beautiful things on them. And then on top of those, you put on 3D trees, right? And you put on your figures, and then you build. They're not quite tiles, but then there's these like sort of borders that you're putting up. So there's
2-dimensional sort of landscapes.
It's almost borders. Like a whole other set of like tile laying. You've got your tile laying on the board, and then you've got the borders you're putting around it. it's gorgeous, and it is three-dimensional, and you're making three-dimensional decisions on this, and it's not heavy. It is pretty light, but there's still a lot of really satisfying decision space in there on placing those tiles and on, you know, building up the most beautiful board game you've ever seen in your life.
It really is, and it is like you're building it up. So as the game goes, it starts out pretty gray, the board. And you're building these colorful tiles and trees and pagodas and everything on top. And it does feel like you're building something.
And I think that's one of the reasons why I like tile laying games. And that's one of the things that's satisfying about them, is to start with a blank canvas or a colorless board, and then to be laying things out and to watch it take shape, like you're actually painting a painting or putting down a mosaic. Like, that is part of what makes a tile laying game so satisfying, is to start with something blank and then end up with that mosaic. And nothing does it better than Ten Garden. It is the king, the queen, the ruling absolute monarch, the supreme deity of going from a blank canvas to a beautiful finished product of board games. It really is. So
good choice.
Right?
Of course.
Yes. My number 2, Ten Garden.
All right. Now, my number 2 and number 1 have some similarities in the sense that they're bigger games where the tiling is just part of the game. But they're both, first off, spectacular games, and really like the tiling aspect of both of them.
I'm going to regret not having one of these on my list, I bet.
And my number 2 is Terraforming Mars.
Okay.
Because in Terraforming Mars, you're doing a lot of different things. You're increasing the temperature on the planet, you're controlling the oxygen levels, all that stuff. But you're also tiling in the center on this map and building out this map. And it's just, I really like building out that map. And I like the tactile nature that adds to what is already a spectacular game, like an engine builder with cards.
Yeah.
You know, like, and so that's one thing about, like, I know people are really into Ares. I know it still has a map, but I feel like that big map is, like, taking that away would take away from the experience.
Agree.
So I really like Terraforming Mars for that reason. I think Terraforming Mars is well known, but just to talk about it, it is largely a card engine game where you get cards, you get a lot of cards, and you play the cards in front of you into a tableau, but then the cards will trigger, like, placing a greenery area on the map, or placing an ocean area on the map, or a city on the map, and that gives you different things and different points and bonuses and stuff like that.
It's interesting. This did not make my list, spoiler alert. But I think when we've talked about Ares expansion, you in particular are vehemently opposed to taking away the map in the middle. I don't want to take it away.
It doesn't take away the map entirely.
I don't want to make this game any less than it is either, but I know that you have, I think, a more, you enjoy the map, obviously, and tile laying in the middle more than I do. I think of it as it's the card engine building that makes it stand out for me. I didn't even think about it as a tile laying, but you're right, it is. It absolutely is. So,
and it's not a small part of the game. It's not a huge part of the game. It's like a third of the game, you know.
Yeah,
it's
a solid piece of it. Yeah.
So, but anyway, my number 2 is Terraforming Mars.
Well,
put a side in the comments.
Pick a side. My number 1 is also a very chunky game where the tile laying is, actually it's kind of a major part of it, but it's not all that there is to it, and that is Carpe Diem.
Oh, okay. Oh, yeah, that's a huge part of Carpe Diem.
It is a huge part of it.
That's high up your list.
There were a couple of Stefan Felds that were sort of floating around the top of my list, but ultimately this is the one because it is really about the it is really about the tile
It's a good game, but it's number 1 on my list for ugly board games.
It is, yeah. I don't think it's that ugly.
I think it's hideous.
It could be a lot prettier. But yeah, but I really love this game, and it is a brain burny, thinky game. The action selection where you're moving, you've got this rondelle and you can only move so far in one direction or the other to get to a tile, to pick up the tile. And I know I need to build out my vineyards because that's going to be my big scorer, but it's so far away and I can't get there, and I'm worried you're going to get there first, so I'm going to go the other way and take a tile that's not so great. And it just and the way your columns score and the scoring
it's
changes.
a very clever design.
Yeah, depending on like how you set it up at the beginning of the game, the columns score differently, and so that is constantly a new puzzle. It's not like, oh, I know I always want to do this because that's always going to score, because it's not. It's not going to score the same in every game, and it's brilliant. It really needs to reprint with a prettier version of it. I mean, I think it would sell like hotcakes. We even have the prettier version. We have the revised edition, and it's still ugly as sin. But there is so much game in this box, and again, it's laying that tile. It's the puzzle of trying to get the pieces you need. So whereas like Carcassonne, just you get what you get out of the bag, right? Here you have to strategize to get what you need, to then get it on the board in the way that you want to get it on the board. And that sort of like deep strategy, that sort of like playing the long game and thinking like, how am I going to set this out from the start of the game, is what makes this game, to me, my favorite, best tile laying game there is.
Okay.
So that's my number one.
All right. My number one's also a big game. Also has tile laying as part of it. Maybe it's a quarter of the game, but I really like the tile laying in this. I like a lot of the decisions in this, and this could have been in that top 10 in my worker placement and wasn't. And so when it popped up on my list of tile placement, I was like, it's got to be up there. I love this game. Even though I really struggled to play it at first, and that's On Mars. And On Mars is Vital Lacerda. It's this really complicated game with a really cool worker placement thing going on, where there's planet side actions and up at the space station side actions, which is a really interesting dichotomy. But at the same time, you're building out with tiles the planet's surface, and you are building different kind of tiles and trying to get different kind of majorities, and producing resources depending on what tiles you put down. And it's really quite interesting.
Yeah.
I liked it a lot, and I like the game a lot. So that's probably why it's number one, is because I like the game a lot. But the tiling itself is actually quite interesting.
It really is.
You got rovers moving around.
Yeah, it really is. It really is. And I think, again, what I think about when I think about the game is more the worker placement, which is why it didn't hit into this list. But you're right, the tiling is actually a pretty substantial part of the game, and
I think so.
It's a solid puzzle in its own right. So it's a good choice. And
that's one of the reasons it's a great game, is it has a really interesting worker placement section. It has a really interesting tile placement section. It's got a really interesting action selection system.
Yeah.
Or bonus triggers and stuff like that going on, and resource development. And it's got a lot going on that's really interesting.
It's an amazing game. It deserves any number one spot it ever gets in.
All right, so that's my number one, On Mars. So, first off, I want to apologize. My energy was a little low. I'm a little tired. We had a barbecue a couple days ago, and my illness does not like activity. So if that comes across, I apologize.
You're fine, dear. You did great.
Well, I feel like I'm low energy, so.
That's all right. I don't think I noticed.
Okay.
I think you're great. All right?
You're biased.
I am biased. I think you're perfect.
But anyway, what are your thoughts about your favorite tile placement games? What are they? What would you put in your top 10? Critique our choices. Whatever you want to say, let us know in the comments below. We'd be glad to talk to you about it.
Yeah, I definitely. And what approach would you take? Because we both sort of took a little bit different approaches, like we did with the worker placement. How would you rate tile placement games if you were doing like top 10 tile placement? Would they just be the best 10 games that also had tile placement?
Right.
Would you think about like how the tile placement works in it? What feels like a good tile placement game? Let us know. Let us know what your faves are.
How would you place these big games like Terraform Mars, On Mars, or what was the one you picked? anyway,
Carpe Diem was...
well, that have tile laying as part of the game, but not the whole game. So, like, if you're doing a mechanism list, if you don't pick them because it's not the core component, they'll never be in any of your mechanism lists. But
right,
they're interesting. And how would you do it? I'm curious how other people would handle that.
Yeah, absolutely.
As we could, I guess we're going to continue to do these mechanism lists. So hopefully this is fun.
Yeah. All right.
Remember,
every day that you game
is a holiday.